everyone, and welcome to the 9th Köhler Romantic Etude. Today's etude is titled Octaves, and it's filled with a lot of them. Octaves are really challenging on the flute, especially because the nature of playing different notes in different octaves means we need to change the direction of the air on the lip plate. Low notes need to go into the hole more, and high notes need to go out of the hole more. So to have a low note next to a high note basically means we need to kind of move the direction of the airstream, which is very challenging, especially at such a fast speed. My tip about octaves would be not to stress about it too much and not to do so much movement. Sometimes when people are playing octaves, they're sort of like, limiting the amount of movement you're doing will really be helpful, especially when going at such a fast speed. You don't want to be moving your head back and forth. Obviously, that's just going to obstruct from the performance and possibly your airspeed. A trick to limiting the movement in your face, I would say, is actually experimenting with your jaw placement. People don't think about the jaw much when they're playing the flute. They just think about the lips, but the lips are kind of moved from your jaw. If you watch, I move my jaw forward. I'm not moving my lips intentionally, my jaw is actually moving my lips. Of course, any movement, rapid jaw movement, not a good technique. You should always be limiting the amount of movement you're doing in any aspect of a performance because it will really just obstruct from your playing. But what's really important is keeping the airstream consistent, especially when going from a high note to a low note. If you sort of drop off the airstream, it'll sound like this. The low note sort of sinks down in pitch, which is not what you want. It also loses its timbre. We want to have a consistent airstream throughout the whole piece. What's moving is the direction of our airstream. It's written marcando sempre la prima della nota legata, which basically means the first note of each tied grouping needs to be emphasized. Marcando meaning like it should be brought out. And this is important because especially when we're going in the first few measures from a low note slowed to a high note, the high note tends to be louder and more energized than the low note. So instead of playing these like grace notes like this, it should be played emphasizing the first note instead of the octave higher, like this. So basically the first note is more important than the second one, as with all tied groupings. But it's worth mentioning that the second note shouldn't be clipped or, cut off abruptly like this. We don't want that effect. We want it all to be legato, as it says, nota legata, so everything is connected, but we still want the first note to be emphasized and the second note not so much. This is very apparent in the second line when you come into the same theme sort of in the inverse. In measure 9, we go... It's the same with this. We don't want the second note to be clipped. We want it to be all connected in legato. In the fourth line, we have a sort of different feel than the beginning. I wrote dance in my part because it kind of feels like it should be a nice groovy dance. It has a nice rhythm, and I think that should be emphasized. So have some fun with this middle section. Make it different than the beginning. Obviously, the beginning is just all octaves. Here you get a little bit of break from the octaves. They're still sort of sparsed in there, but just have fun with this section. It's important to remember the line, especially in this middle section. You don't want to get too carried away. If I play for you just the line of the fourth line down, it would sound like this. That's basically the line, and how you see that is the first note of each each tied grouping should be emphasized, should be brought out, but don't clip the second note. Breathing is also very challenging in this etude, especially because there is not really any rests, except for the third line down. There's a 16th note rest, which I guess you should take the chance to breathe there. So you have to phrase everything in groups, and then at the end of that group, you can breathe. So the way that I phrased it was I grouped the whole section with a low note going up to a high note. I grouped that all together because that is kind of one thought. And then I breathed, and then I played the second section where the first note is higher than the second note. Identifying these areas where, a phrase sort of ends and another one begins is important, and that will give you time to breathe in between those two sections. In the last line, it's written incalzando sempre fino al fine, which basically means that it should be sort of a chasing feel until we get to the ending. So this whole last line, I want you to think of this as kind of like you're chasing someone. You're sort of pressed for time and you need to finish. And you kind of get that feeling because you're running out of breath and you really need to end the piece so you can breathe again. But that's not to say you should speed up too much. Obviously, too much is never good, but this can be a little faster than the rest of the etude. As with all of the Köhler romantic etudes, people tend to play the last note way too long. It's a 8th note. There's no fermata anywhere. There's actually 2 8th note rests right after the 8th note, meaning that there should be some rest. And the rest, the space, the empty noise, that is what makes it good. Of course, this should be a dramatic ending, but the drama should not come from playing the last note longer than it is written. Dynamics are kind of obscure in this etude specifically. The only thing that is written is a mezzo forte at the beginning and a forte later on by the end. So there's not much, and I urge you to kind of add your own dynamics to this to make it interesting in your own manner. What I did was the second time that I played a phrase, for example, the dance section in the middle of the etude, the second time I played that a little quieter to kind of give the feeling that something is changing because it's kind of just left up to interpretation. I hope this video helped, and if you're playing any of the other Köhler romantic etudes, be sure to subscribe because I'm recording all of these and teaching them as well. If you would like to study with me, my website is devynflute.com. I'm teaching lessons remotely, and you can book lessons with me there. I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye.